Greetings, music lovers. George Daugherty is back on the show, and his concert Bugs Bunny at the Symphony turns 35 alongside Bugs Bunny's own 85th anniversary this July. And once you know it, they are both coming to the historic Hollywood Bowl. So, of course, you realize this means podcast. Hello and welcome to Of Course You Realize This Means podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Graves, and Maestro George Daugherty is back to talk about his show, Bugs Bunny at the Symphony. George, how are you?
I am fine. How are you, Jonathan?
I am doing well. Thank you for taking the time and coming on the show. It was a blast to have you on last time. We talked about everything about Looney Tunes, from Art Davis to popular music at the time to the workings and masterful music choices by Milt Franklin and Carl Stalling. And I am excited to get your take on the modern day Looney Tunes that you are presenting alongside the classic shorts. But before we get into that, you've been traveling. You've been traveling the world, and I'm curious, have there been any fan interactions after the show that have really stuck with you as you have continued to do this for the 35 years of presenting Looney Tunes shorts in front of people?
Well, there are already so many, I couldn't even remember all of them because they're so fantastic. We have incredible fan interactions. People really come to this concert with a great deal of passion and a great deal of fond memories from their own childhoods at watching these great cartoons, and they're always anxious to talk about it and to share their memories. So that is fantastic. Always.
Yeah,
and especially now that we're doing a lot of international stuff. We've been in Italy. We just did the concert in Italy, in Rome, in the Teatro Argentino, wow, which is the actual opera house where the Barber of Seville was first premiered in 1840.
That's incredible.
The Teatro Argentina. And so to be there with the Rabbit of Seville was very sweet.
Chuck Jones would be so happy to hear that.
He would have been.
And I don't know if you know this, but you are coming to the Hollywood Bowl on July 11th, which actually hits the 103rd birthday of the Hollywood Bowl. It was constructed and opened on July 11th, 1922.
There are a lot of birthdays occurring during this period. Of course, Bugs's 85th is July 27th. And so we're almost on the exact date. And the Hollywood Bowl has always been a incredibly well, it's the Valhalla of cartoondom for these cartoons, especially since 4 of the cartoons actually take place in an animated Hollywood Bowl. It's just heaven to be there. And I didn't realize it was the 103rd birthday on that exact date. In fact, I'm not even sure they realize it. I'm going to tell them.
Please do. And out of all of them, my favorite is Long-Haired Hare from 1949, which has Bugs Bunny destroying the Hollywood Bowl and its concentric arches, which are very reminiscent of the concentric circles that open every Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes, cartoon, accompanied by the melody of Merry Go Round Broke Down. I think it's so, cyclical for it to be you playing that short inside the Hollywood Bowl. And it's been such a long time since you've been there. So I'm happy that it's finally happening again.
Yeah, we were scheduled to be there in 2020 for Bugs's 80th birthday. And we'd pulled out all the stops for that. And then the little thing called the COVID shutdown came and visited upon us all. And and then it took 5 years to really pull it all back together. And also, we were waiting for another sort of epic birthday anniversary. So we're hitting it on 85. But it's very funny you should mention that moment from Long-Haired Hair, because I wish I remembered off the top of my head exactly which year it was. I don't, because we've been at the Bowl 18 times, 18 performances since early 1990s with this concert. But the last performance on the old original Hollywood Bowl shell was our concert. Wow. And it was in the early 2000s. Okay. And we did Long-Haired Hair. And during that moment, wrecking balls were parked out behind the bowl. And the next morning, it came down for real, just like Giovanni Jones and Bugs. And so that was another, indelible bowl-related, art imitates life, imitates art, moment. And now we're, of course, on the new shell. We can look up that date later, but it was in the early 2000s.
That's fantastic. I had no idea that coincided.
So long-haired hair enters into this,
very prominently too, because I think it's a fan favorite out of all of them.
Oh, definitely. Well, that and you can't ever deny the Rabbit of Seville and What's Opera Doc. Those are, always on the top 2 spots of the world's greatest cartoon lists. Whenever you see that,
for sure. That actually leads me into my next.
And of course, right up here on the wall, I was trying to frame it so you could see it, but that is an original Chuck Jones painting of Bugs coming down the side of the mountain on the big fat assed horse.
From What's Opera Doc?
Yeah. What's Opera Doc? We have a lot of Chuck in our house.
Rightfully so. You got to work with him.
Rightfully so is right. But behind us is Toulouse-Lautrec on that wall, who was, believe it or not, my great-great-grandfather was his paramour in Paris in the late 1800s. And then we have Chuck all over the place. So what more can you want out of life but Chuck Jones and Toulouse-Lautrec?
I think that's all you need.
That covers everything.
You don't need food. You don't need water. You just need Chuck Jones in your life.
Yeah.
So that actually leads me to my next question is, while touring these cartoons, which classic short never fails to bring you joy or a smile to your face as you're conducting for it?
Well, I always try to avoid saying which one is my favorite, because after 35 years of doing this, I feel like I should be the parent that doesn't have a favorite. But funny you should mention it, because the one that I love every moment of What's Opera Doc. And I love every moment of the Rabbit of Seville, and I love every moment of all of them. But my favorite has to be to conduct and to be in the middle of it all is Long-Haired Hair.
What did they do on a rainy night in Rio? A rinky-pinky-pink, what did they do when there is no starry sky? Oh, starry sky.
Because there are just so many indelible true life moments of the spoofs on the classical music world, and there's so much music in that. What's Opera Doc is, of course, all Wagner. The Rabbit of Seville is all Rossini, but Long-Haired Hair has Wagner, Rossini. It has the sextet from Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti, which Giovanni sings by himself instead of as a sextet. It has it has the beautiful Galatea by von Suppé. It has so much
It has
stuffed
Bugs
into
dressed
it,
as Leopold.
but also and that moment.
Leopold! Leopold! Leopold!
The Bugs moment as Leopold is something that is world renowned and iconic. Wherever we are, in Italy, in Mexico, wherever we are, people are screaming out, Leopold, 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 as Bugs enters the pit of the Hollywood Bowl to conduct. And people always associate Leopold Stokowski with the Philadelphia Orchestra because he was the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra for decades. And we've done this concert many times with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And they're normally a pretty dignified group, but even they start screaming Leopold because it's part of their history. But that moment actually really took place at the Hollywood Bowl because Leopold Stokowski was also the original conductor of the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And so he actually conducted at the Bowl. So Chuck was taking a real moment out of history, out of musical history, out of Hollywood Bowl history, out of, cultural history with that entire cartoon.
So was that back in the 20s? That Leopold was conducting?
Yes, early on, yeah.
Wow.
I don't have the exact date. With you, I should actually have a second computer here to fact check all the time so I could give you the right answers. But it definitely was in the early days of the Bowl.
We don't have all the dates,
And,
but we know the important events.
Well, yeah, we do. But there was so much synergy and connection between Warner Brothers and the Hollywood Bowl because, first of all, they're only 2 miles from each other. You know, you just get on the Hollywood freeway from the Bowl and get off at Barham, and you're at Warner
Right
Brothers.
over the hill.
But right over the hill. But in the early days, the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra would actually rehearse on the scoring stage at Warner Brothers because they needed a place to rehearse.
Yeah.
And so that was that also.
That's cool. I love all this history.
And then, Baton Bunny is set in the Bowl, an animated version of the Bowl. You don't see it quite as much as in Long-Haired Hair. The Rabbit of Seville is set in the Bowl, although with a proscenium curtain, which they used to do for fully staged operas. And they actually did the Barber of Seville at the Bowl. So that's another moment in history.
Is Rhapsody Rabbit supposed to be at the Bowl, or is that just a stage somewhere?
I don't think Rhapsody Rabbit has an actual location, but we can pretend it's at the Bowl.
What's up, Doc? Who? Franz Liszt. Never heard of him.
And we have 17 cartoons in this concert at the Bowl, which is 17 Looney Tunes, which is the highest number ever in one concert.
Wow.
Well,
thank you for being that repository for people to go and find, a place to watch these classics.
What'd you say? Oh, repository. I thought I heard something else. Never mind. But if people come to this concert and don't get their Looney Tunes-dom satiated, then they're in the wrong place. They're in the wrong life.
True, or they need to go home and buy a Blu-ray and queue up some more.
Absolutely.
So Bugs Bunny turns 85 this year, and he's still quite popular amongst adults and children. What is it about the character that you think allows for such enduring influence?
Well, I mean, Chuck Jones is always the first one to say, I didn't make these cartoons for kids. He did not make them for kids, but he didn't make them for kids. of course, as you well know, these were originally seen in movie theaters before the big feature. And so they were made for everybody. And Chuck Jones, Friz Freleng, Bob Clampett, Tex Avery, Robert McKimson, they were also adept at walking a really brilliant line of appealing to kids in one way and then appealing to adults in a totally different way. And I've always noticed for years, for decades, as we do this around the world, that I hear three very different, distinct kinds of laughter coming from the audience. I hear the kids laughing at very didactic, big pratfall kind of stuff. I hear the adults laughing at all the double entendres and triple entendres, the sly wit, the slightly naughty stuff, which the kids just goes over the kids' heads. And then I hear everyone laughing together at, the really indelible, brilliant, stuff. So the gags are...
I'm sure, because the Wile E. Coyote shorts are prominent here.
Absolutely. We have 4 in this cartoon concert. We have Zoom and Board, the great classic, which was the only score that was ever co-composed by Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin together equally. And it's brilliant. It's genius. It's a ballet. It's a tone poem musically. And then we have the 3 new 3D Coyote Roadrunner cartoons with absolutely brilliant scores by Christopher Leonard's, which are just fabulous to perform, fabulous to listen to, in your face, bigger than life. That is so huge that I can actually feel the stage vibrating under me during those 3 cartoons.
Wow.
These 3 new cartoons, because the sound is just, between the music and the sound effects, it is so intense. So that's Rabbit Rider, Coyote Falls, and Fur of Flying.
And those were produced in the early 2000s.
Yes. And Christopher Leonard's is a genius. He was, and then Carl Johnson, another Carl, did the new scores for Dynamite Dance, which is new. And also the new Bugs Bunny short. We're premiering a brand new birthday short. And then also Wet Cement.
Very nice. And
so
that can also be found
a lot of stuff
with Looney Tunes cartoons on Max.
Absolutely.
Have you had...
Or whatever they're called this week.
Yes. Have you had a chance to catch The Day the Earth Blew Up, which is composed by Joshua Mosier?
I just watched it 3 days ago on the plane coming back from Nashville. It was suddenly on the on United's rotation of movies, and I thought, okay. And I was sitting in first class. I had good sound and a nice big screen in front of me. I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this now. I want to see it again, but I didn't catch it in the theater because we were touring at that time. But yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was amazing. And God bless Ketchup Entertainment for bringing it to screens everywhere. As will they do the same for Coyote versus Acme.
Oh yes,
coming.
We are huge champions of Ketchup Entertainment, as you might be aware,
yes.
And their work with Looney Tunes and saving it from the archives and the vaults of Warner Brothers. But yeah, The Day the Earth Blew Up just blew me away as well. It has fantastic scores, a killer powerhouse segment, and the entire thing is just beautiful from beginning to end, and the music is right there with it. And I think Joshua Mosier did a killer job with that.
Yeah, and I'm so jealous that they have Powerhouse. A little interesting factoid. Warner Brothers was incredible about buying and having the rights to 99% of the songs, the original stuff that made their way into the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. Of course, the classical stuff, the Wagner, the Rossini, all that, Johann Strauss, Smetana, von Suppé, Donizetti, Franz Liszt, those are all public domain, so those were never clearance problems. Then all the songs, like in One Froggy Evening, Hello, My Baby, all the songs that Giovanni Jones sings at the beginning of Long-Haired Hair, What Do You Do on a Rainy Night in Rio, and My Gal's a Fancy Stepper. And when I always trip up on this one, when Yuba plays the rumba on the tuba, Warner Brothers ended up owning all those. The one thing that slipped through their grasp when they didn't own is all the Raymond Scott stuff, which is still owned by the Raymond Scott estate and family, which includes, of course, Powerhouse. And so we currently are not able to do any cartoons that have Powerhouse in it while that's being all sorted out. But no worries. There's thousands of other pieces of music that
all brilliant
we have access to. Yeah.
So Eric Bauza, who provided the voice for Daffy and Porky, and that will be joining you, as well as Bob Bergen, who provided the voice of Porky for many projects, including Looney Tunes cartoons back there, right after Mel Blanc. What can we expect from their appearances at the concert?
Well, both of these are going to be hilarious. I don't want to give it all away because the element of surprise is going to be a huge audience delight and factor. All I will say is that Eric Bauza is a force of nature. He is quite possibly the most enthusiastic and joyful person I've ever met in show business. And he is sort of like his energy level, even though he's now Bugs's voice, Daffy's voice, everybody's voice.
Yeah, pretty
almost. Much. His energy level is sort of like Taz. Taz
sure.
in full cyclone mode, in a really amazingly good way. So Eric Bauza is going to do something that is going to bring down the house. Bob Bergen is one of my favorite people on the planet. His voicings of Porky are iconic. When he was like 10 years old, Bob Bergen actually called up Mel Blanc. And not only did Bob call up Mel Blanc, he recorded the conversation on his little cassette recorder from whenever that was, 1960s.
Wow.
And has the whole conversation.
Have you heard it?
And it is, yes, I've heard it, yeah. And have you had Bob on your podcast?
I have not yet.
You really should. And he'll bring that recording.
Okay.
And it is the first thing that Mel Blanc says is, "How did you get my number?" And then 10-year-old Bob or 12-year-old Bob, however old he was, just charms him to death. You really should have Bob on and play that recording because it is just unbelievable that it even happened. And it's more unbelievable that as a young kid, he had the foresight to record
Sure.
it. So he goes back really in the history of all of this. And he knew Mel. He worked with Mel. Bob started earlier than Eric did. Mm-hmm. So they had, some crossover, which was fantastic. So in many ways, Mel Blanc was a mentor to Bob.
That's fantastic. It's so fascinating how the world of Looney Tunes has infiltrated the voice actors' lives. Speaking of voice actors, alongside Bob Bergen is Jeff Bergman. All the bees, Bauza, right. Bergman, Bergen. But Jeff Bergman actually got to interact with Mel at college, and he got to meet him in his hotel room, and they had a chat for an hour, and then later on he got to voice Bugs Bunny in multiple things. So it's really fascinating how the whole gamut of the cartoon industry brings people together like that. But yeah, I would love to have Bob on.
We got to work with Mel briefly at the very beginning of Bugs Bunny, back when it was called Bugs Bunny on Broadway, which was our first name for the first 15 years or 10 years. But Bob also was working with him back in that point. So we all have lots of combined stories about this. But believe it or not, we didn't have a clean "That's all, folks" for our show for the ending.
Wow.
There just wasn't a clean recording of that. So, and we needed we did another few things. So Mel came in and did some recordings. Then, very, very sadly, he died right during this exact period of time. It was in the summer of 1989, I believe, or the summer fall 1989 into 1990. I think actually early 1990 was when he passed away, and that's when that incredible poster came out. The Speechless poster that has all the characters bowing their head behind a mic and an empty spotlight. So his son Noel came in and finished off some of the things we needed because he was doing the voices back then also.
Wow, fascinating.
But I remember going to his memorial, which was at the I think it was either at SAG-AFTRA or the Directors Guild Theater in Hollywood. It was quite a day. Everyone from June Foray, who we knew, everyone was there. Chuck was still alive. Friz Freleng was still alive. It was quite an assemblage.
So while working with Chuck Jones, were there any inspirational quotes or moments that you remembered that you take into, these performances or these concerts?
So many I can't count them. I don't even know where to start. We had an amazing relationship with Chuck, a very close relationship. David Wong, my producing partner and co-creator and husband and everything else he is in my life, we got to work directly with Chuck during the early period, the first 10 years, definitely, of this concert.
Wow.
And also on other things. I mean, Chuck Jones just handed us one day all his character design for Peter and the Wolf and said, "I'm not going to have time to do this. You guys do it." And so those Emmys back there were won by us for Chuck Jones's Peter and the Wolf. Chuck had so many quotes, so many stories. We closed down so many restaurants at 2:00 in the morning where he would just be telling the stories and nobody wanted the evening to end. And then he actually got kind of involved in things. So when we were remastering What's Opera Doc, Chuck came to some of the sessions and listened to the sound effect. Because in 1990, when we did this, 89, 90, when we were starting to produce this, technology was very crude when it comes to audio and video stuff. Very. Now there are so many computerized programs, that, Sonic Solutions, Finale, Sibelius, all these things that can be used. Back then we were just doing it the old-fashioned way. And none of the separated tracks had been saved from either What's Opera Doc or The Rabbit of Seville or really any of the others. None of them. None of them. So
that's shocking.
We were given but think how much it would have. There were 1,000 Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. Yeah. All of this stuff was on magnetic 35 millimeter film. The storage alone was huge. So all they saved was the composite track of dialogue, sound effects, music, and dialogue, sound effects, and music. Yeah, and we had to remove the music so we could then remaster the dialogue and the sound effects. Wow. One amazing thing, we sorry, I got caught on my headphone cable. One of the things that was amazing that we were given access to all of the great sound effects genius Treg Brown. We were given access to all of his recordings of all of his sound effects, all of them. And we were able to remaster them. And then we had a wonderful sound effects designer and sound supervisor named Rob Winter, who's still involved with us, who recreated them all exactly as they had been originally created. But now in this new frontier of having, separated sound effects, dialogue, and one thing I remember about Chuck, which was really funny, is that so we're in there and we get to the end of What's Opera Doc, and there is a moment. Of course, as most of your fans know, and as you know, Mel Blanc never did Elmer Fudd. Elmer Fudd was always voiced by this old character actor named Arthur Q. Bryant, and Arthur Q. Bryant, Mel Blanc had the best agent in Hollywood, and Arthur Q. Bryant had the worst. Mel Blanc got credits on cartoons where he never opened his mouth, and poor Arthur Q. Bryant never got a credit on a single solitary Looney Tune. So one of my life's missions is to make sure that Arthur Q. Bryant is also celebrated like the amazing Mel Blanc was. But at the end, when Elmer's going, north winds blow, south winds blow, fires, blah, blah, blah. And then he screams out, smog. And at one point, that was replaced with Mel doing a very high smog. So I said something to Chuck at the mixing session. I said, this has always bothered me a little bit. Now that we're in concert form and we're trying to do everything very authentically, would you mind if I put Arthur Q. Bryant's smog back in? Because we had it. And Chuck said, I didn't agree with it when we did it the first time. It should have been him from the beginning. So our version of this is different from all others, that it has Arthur Q. Bryant screaming smog.
No way.
Yeah. So listen to that when you hear it in our concert. Because Arthur Q. Bryant's is very low. Smog. Mel's was smog. So
I had no
listen
idea.
for that moment. Yeah. So ours is actually more authentic than the release version.
My gosh. I'm going to listen for that now. Thank you. Thank you for telling our listeners that. That's amazing. That's a wonderful anecdote.
Well, it's one of the many secrets of the behind the scenes of this. But I mean, it was such an unbelievable experience to actually get to work with Chuck as we did these things.
I mean, I can only imagine the stories and the late nights and just just having him there as a creative force.
I mean, for me, it's like what it would be like to conduct Don Giovanni with Mozart sitting there. Yeah. Or whatever. And Chuck came to every single concert that he could. And he loved to come out, and he was at the Bowl with us many times. And he'd come out and tell stories. And he'd get started. The audience was being raptured. Chuck would just keep going with his stories. And I would always see like a red-faced personnel manager, stage manager in the wings thinking about overtime. Yeah. But it didn't matter, And then Chuck would not go off the stage. We'd bring a chair out, and he'd sit out there with the orchestra. He'd sit out on the stage with the orchestra because he said, this is the way I heard it the first time. When Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin conducted these sessions on the scoring stage, I would sit not in the booth, I would sit in the middle of the orchestra.
Wow.
So that's so emotional to me about all of this material, because I am such an unbelievable admirer of Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin. But Carl Stalling only got to conduct his masterpieces one time only. And that was the day they were recorded, and never completely, because they would record them in separate cues. Right. So he never got to conduct What's Opera Doc or The Rabbit of Seville or Long-Haired Hare or High Note or any of these from beginning to end. And I've gotten to do it thousands of times, the only person in the world who has been doing this. Warner Brothers has been very fantastic to us over these 3.5 decades in so many ways. But one of the ways is they've kept this for us to do. So there aren't other people out there performing this stuff. Everybody wants to, but it's just us who are performing it.
Well, I'm glad you're out there, and I can only imagine the joy and energy it brings to you every single time you get out there and look at the work that's on that screen and the work that's being done in front of you with the orchestras across the world. And I'm, again, grateful. Our listeners are grateful. I know that they love the show and that they attend the symphony whenever they can. And yeah, I urge every one of you who's listening to this to go and buy a ticket either July 11th or July 12th for the Hollywood Bowl, or in your city whenever it's touring. Check your local listings. Tickets are on sale now for Hollywood. And yeah, George, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been a pleasure and a delight to have you.
Well, it's always a delight. It's always a delight speaking to you. And one of the things that's really fantastic for your audience is that this gives them an opportunity that is almost otherwise unheard of these days, to see these cartoons and these animated shorts on a big screen, on a huge screen, because everyone is used to seeing them on TV from the 1960s, or seeing them now on their iPhones or their digital devices. But when you see them on a gigantic screen, there's just a level of detail that you never noticed before. Even last week in Nashville, 35 years into this, I noticed a couple of things I'd never noticed before. One of them was in One Froggy Evening, and another one was in Long-Haired Hair, that I'd never. And it's fantastic. At one point, Giovanni Jones is so excited about having Leopold in front of him that Giovanni Jones starts doing like a little dance. And I had never noticed his feet moving before. And then last week, it's like, oh my God, he's dancing here. Or whatever he's doing.
And not to mention the communal experience, watching these cartoons with a crowd, with an audience. I think it adds another dynamic to it.
That is the fourth level of the soundscape. Because we obviously music, dialogue, sound effects, but audience reaction. Yeah. Because they were meant to be seen in theaters, Chuck and all the great directors timed them for a laughing audience, for applause, for reaction. So sometimes when you're watching them all by yourself with your iPhone, there are kind of some blank spots where like something should be happening here. Well, that thing was the audience reacting. And we always tell all of our audience, don't be polite when you come to this concert. People say, oh, do you get upset when someone's cell phone goes off? It's like, someone's cell phone goes off. Who could hear it? Who could hear a cell phone going off in this concert where we have Acme, TNT, and everything happening?
It's a party.
No, we want the audience to, they sing along, they know the lyrics, they are so involved. There's such a thing these days about immersive experiences, immersion, but these cartoons were the original immersive experience. They were the original immersion cultural phenomenon.
They really were.
So they were ahead of so many things, and they still are. And that's why my parting thought is that when you look at these, they could have been made yesterday. They are as current and as fresh today, and that is what the great Chuck Jones told me. He said, my goal was always to make them timeless, to not make them so caught up in the time period where we made them. And when you look at One Froggy Evening, when the cityscape is built, when you look at Wile E. Coyote's sonic shoes, when you look at so many of these things, they look like things that we're seeing today in our pop culture world. They were brilliant.
Masterpieces.
They had a time machine. They had a time machine.
They truly were geniuses of their time, and we're still talking about them today. So there you go. Testament to the masterfulness of the animation, but the writing and the vibrancy and just the comedic timing, unmatched, unparalleled. You can't find it anywhere else.
One other little thing that I love, one little touch that I love that I want your audience to be sure and notice, in this brand new short we have, which we're calling Happy Birthday Bugs, which is a wonderful new short celebrating Bugs' birthday, and with a wonderful new score by Carl Johnson. Every single Looney Tunes character, over 50 of them, are seen in this one cartoon. Even if it's in the background. They're all there. Some of which I didn't even know the names of them. I had to do some serious research because they're ones from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. They're all there, which it was a very wonderful, fantastic honoring of the past by the director, Pete
Browngarden.
It really just cemented the legacy in those few minutes. Love that.
I love that as well, and I love the dedication that they brought to this revitalized look at Looney Tunes through that 40s, 30s, 40s lens. And I wish we could continue it. I wish we could get more of it. Warner Brothers, are you listening? Bring it back.
Well, Warner Brothers is very aware of I don't ever speak for them because they speak fantastic for themselves, but they treasure and cherish Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes is an absolute treasured asset that they are so in awe and honor of. There's a lot of corporate things going on, all of our industry, not just Warner Brothers, everywhere. But I think the Looney Tunes are very safe and in their hands, and we are very grateful to Warner Brothers for letting us do this for 35 years and still counting.
Yes, absolutely. And I've also heard that sentiment. So, don't get out your pitchforks just yet. They're in
no
safe
pitchforks
hands
are necessary
behind the shield.
No, it's a very the world. The world, even the entertainment world as I even knew it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, just doesn't even exist anymore. It's just everything is different, but nevertheless, we have some incredible things that still remain the same, and Looney Tunes will always be one of them.
Amen to that. Well, thank you, George, and have a wonderful day. And if you haven't already, check out Bugs Bunny at the Symphony. It will change your life for the better. And as always, that's not all, folks. Have a wonderful day.